Hi, it's Kirby. It is August 14th, 2025, and this is an unexpected live. Um, it's about 4:30-ish in the morning in New York. But those of you who know me know that I get up at a ridiculously early time. So, I get up early and I am inundated with a ton of DMs and email, and many people said, "Oh, Candace Owens mentioned you in her recent podcast on Jeffrey Epstein," but they didn't really tell me where. So I wasted about a half hour. It wasted because, I was hoping that she would sort of mention me because, so I think I'm maybe the only survivor of somebody in this network who is also a researcher. I write books. I've been on this long before JE was arrested, but it's not a one off case, as pretty much mainstream and everybody describes the JE case. And, but primarily, I'm just somebody who survived. I've survived a lot, and I have been trying to expose this network for decades. Well, I'm going to talk about Bob Fitrakis, who is arguably the first person, the very first person to discuss this case. I just want to say that in the meanwhile, I did write all of these books. Everything that Candace said, including a mistake I made in one of these books, she quoted, and then she called me a man, a guy. And yeah, there are some people who are named Kirby who are men, but she has a staff that researches and is probably subscribes to my newsletter and who buys my books. And it would have been very nice if Candace Owen, is it Owen or Owens, whatever it is, to at least, because I'm a survivor and because my voice is suppressed, to at least give me credit. It was nice for her to mention me once as a guy, but come on. And she made other mistakes. Okay, fine. It's because her researchers aren't really doing a great job. So, I reached out to Bob very early. It was July of 2019, long before other people were not crediting him. And I'm going to leave that on set, the name of the person who was not crediting him, I should say. And we had a couple of very long conversations, and what I ended up doing was, at the time that I spoke with Bob Fitrakis, who again was the only person that was covering the JE situation because he lives in Ohio, with Leslie Wexner, and who then gave me permission to include some vital information in my book. It's like, okay, well, then I think it's time for me to share some of what I discovered by talking to the man who was there before anyone else. Now, so I think I'll start perhaps by explaining who Bob is. All right. So, like, I'm going to have to just look at my book here, and I'm reading. So, like, he held an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, and it was completely scrubbed. A lot of the stuff that's on Reddit that we thought would be on Reddit forever has been scrubbed. I cannot post anything on Reddit. It's immediately deleted. I used to participate on Reddit. In fact, it was on Reddit that I was told, "Oh, you should have Ask Me Anything," and I held three of them. But a lot of the information that I shared, and that in fact, other people who I have since met, it's just scrubbed so that, we're left, at least we, meaning the people that have had their information removed, including me, we're left scratching our heads. Well, why is really pertinent information being scrubbed from Reddit? And a pretty important voice, I would think, because if we look at who my person was, it would be Michelle Rickless's son, who pretty much financed the Jonathan Pollard, Rafi Eitan espionage case of the century at the time. Okay, so you would think that I would have some information and something to contribute to the ongoing exploration, but on my YouTube channel, I'm not even at 20,000 followers. On my Substack, I think I have about 7,000. And Twitter, well, that account was made to disappear. However, the JE case is, in fact, the most mind-numbing and most mysterious and most important case of our lifetime. So, yeah, so I had a couple of conversations with him, and he was a really nice guy. He shared with me something that, frankly, Candace begins her show with, which she then mentions later. She's like, oh, Jeff Epstein equal toe tag. The only place to get that would be through me, because that is what Bob Fitrakis shared with me. So again, I don't know. I should be used to people kind of trampling all over me. After all, who am I? Right? Who am I? I'm just a survivor. I'm just a survivor. So yeah, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed. But I mean, I wasn't going to do this podcast, but I decided the hell with it. I'm going to share work that Bob Fitrakis first introduced. All right. Now, he did host his Ask Me Anything right after Epstein's arrest. And now he is a political science professor in the social sciences department at Columbus State Community College, where he basically won the Distinguished Professor Award in 2012. He has a PhD in political science from Wayne State University and a JD from the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. He was a Ford Foundation Fellow to the Michigan State Legislature and currently serves, at the time of this writing, which I believe I wrote this book in 2019, and I believe I published it in 2020. At the time of this communication, he was a Near East area commissioner. Now, Fitrakis was also a columnist, and he was an investigative reporter for Columbus Alive from 1996 to 2002. And that was a local alternative newspaper. A lot of the states had these local weekly newspapers. But he was awarded first place for best coverage of the government. And second place, first place for a report on a senator that is closely connected to Leslie Wexner. I'm not going to go into him right now, but second place for his article, Spook Air, about Southern Air Transport's ties to the CIA. And I have to use substance running at Rickenbacker Air Base in Central Ohio. He won second prize for this. And then what he discovered was, all of his articles that he had written, they were removed as soon as Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. All of his articles that he wrote about J.E. and Leslie Wexner's, quote, relationship, gone. So what I am going to do is I'm going to try to include most of the Q&As that he answered during the Now Scrubbed AMA that he held in 2019, which again, when he and I spoke, he gave me complete permission to use this and to publish it. And, I did, but, I gave him credit. So he did, remember now, this happened in 2019, so I'm going to start with this. This is the question. Would you say the stage is set for Epstein to finally face real justice, or will he be waltzing free 5 years from now? To which Bob responded, it's likely he'll be, I'm going to have to use the word, unalived in prison. So he was the first person to know that J.E. was not going to make it. If arrested, he was going to be unalived. He said, I think they'll limit the things he's able to say at trial, just like Manuel Noriega. And then I'm going to just try to just skip over some very long questions. And then he just goes on to add with a second question that came in behind that one. I think he's more likely to be unalived so that he can't talk. He's in the same position as DC Madam. I think the latest indictment of Epstein is motivated by the allegation of R word against Trump at an Epstein residence. It was a direct attack on Trump's cabinet as well, since Acosta was the prosecutor for Epstein in 2008. Although the New York Times now reports that Bill Clinton flew on the Lolita Express, so I'm thinking he gets unalived in prison. So then, he's the only one and the first one to kind of have this thing. And then somebody did ask about the exposure of this stuff, and then Bob's answer is, I had the same dream as you. People want to expose injustice. He goes on to add, now this is very important because he's on the ground in Ohio talking to people as this was happening, okay? So he said, I cultivated sources very close to Wexner on his payroll. I also asked numerous public officials for information. A few actually came through. Remember, all cans of worms open from the inside. There are people who are appalled at what Wexner and Epstein did, and they're willing to provide information if they think it will go public. People want to fight inhumane injustices. So I'm just going to take a quick break. I am going to look at your comments. Hey, Debbie, you made it to the live. Thanks. Professor Hamamoto calls her a pop-up pundit. I'm going to just say, yeah, that's good insight. Heidi, thanks for joining. It's Hawaii time. Well, I wish I was in Hawaii right now. Veronica, nice to see you here. Good morning, everyone. Likewise, I should have said good morning to you guys, but I got a little pumped up here. All right, I'm gonna keep going with, and if you have questions, guys, just put a Q, and if there's time, I'm happy to address this stuff. So let's see. A lot of people did ask questions that are like 2-3 paragraphs long. And I'm going to see if it's relevant to our So what he does mention is how the Wexner Foundation hired pollsters and helped disseminate the propaganda on how to sell the war in Iraq to the public. He was, again, the first one to write about this. And then he talks about the Shapiro murder file because it was he, by the way, who received it by mistake. And he wrote about this, okay? And then he goes on to say the Shapiro murder file ties Wexner directly to organized crime. During the building of Wexner's model community, New Albany, which is like a new suburb in Columbus, Ohio, his prominent tax attorney, Arthur Shapiro, was unalived in a mob-style hit the day before he was to meet with the IRS and federal agents. Now, what I want to say is that when Bob and I were talking about this at the time in 2019, after J.E.'s arrest, I dove into Arthur Shapiro. And what I found, and I may have shared it with Bob, I don't remember. What I found that there are a lot of shell companies that Shapiro had formed in Florida. Florida, don't forget, is where, with Wexner's money, and it can be traced if you're reading my work, I always show you where the money comes from. And by the way, I don't think it was Wexner's money. I've always called Wexner a cutout, a funnel that was used, him and Leon Black, they were used to funnel money to JE, much in the same way that the Rockefeller Institute was used to funnel money into creating the Museum of Modern Art, which we know is connected to Leon Black. But the Museum of Modern Art is also a CIA, let's just call it, creation. And those of you who follow my work and know what I've done with Leon Black and how I've gone back into history with Eli Black. And again, I hate to just keep saying that I was the first one, but I was. Yeah, I have no reason to say I was the first one when I wasn't. And Bob was the very, very first one. So, you know, he was killed, Arthur Shapiro. But again, there were like these shell companies that even I haven't written about it because I just think if people are actually doing their due diligence, they'll find what I found, but nobody has. And so, however, it was determined that Les Wexner was a key suspect, as was Epstein, as per Bob Fitrakis, because he spoke with the people who were looking into Arthur Shapiro's sudden unalivement and how it was suppressed from the media. So, and then he goes on to add, Bob, news accounts attribute Southern Air Transport, which was formerly Air America, the notorious gun and DRUG running airline, coming to Columbus, Ohio, to Les Wexner, ostensibly to transport clothes for the limited brand, which includes Victoria's Secret. Now, what I want to interject here is that Alicia Owen, who is one of the Franklin survivors, said, as one of the many things that she shared during her many depositions in the 1990s when they were trying to suppress that and ultimately called it a hoax, she said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have her direct quote, but that she had met with French drug runners who had supplied her with, let's just say, Intel connected DRUG for her to deposit somewhere else. And these kids were meant to fly, let's say, to California, where the Hollywood industry is, right? Or at least where it was at the time. And that she had a very large percentage given to her. So I'm just going to keep on going. So the question then was posed, do you believe this was an intelligence operation? Whose operation and why don't the agencies try to avoid direct involvement? To which Bob responded, I believe the evidence points to JE serving as an asset for the CIA in collecting information, of which transportation girls, remember, I have to use other words on this platform because, you know, hey, we don't really live in a free society where we can say anything we can. Otherwise, my channel is going to be gone. And that this was just one of the tactics that he used to accomplish this. And then he goes on to add, yes, intelligence agencies often avoid direct involvement in these types of operations due to the liability this creates for the agency involved. However, intelligence agencies around the world use people like JE. Now, he goes on to add, JE's reach was global, but no doubt other operations are conducted by other individuals and serve other agencies of other countries. We can only speculate how many similar operations exist at any given moment. So I'm just going to take a look at, I'm going to answer this now. Hi, Shivani. Thanks for being here. So who was putting such big bucks into Wexner's hands? Well, the money is funneled by intelligence agencies. So in this case, I've often said, yes, CIA was funneling money. If you look at Wexner and what I have shared on my Substack, on my Patreon, in my books, and really I used to have it on my tweets, but Musk made all of that information disappear. I say CIA, Mossad, MI5, MI6, there are connections that are directly, and I show with receipts how it's connected. And that is how the CIA, for example, can avoid being implicated in something like this. And so it's a funnel, and it was put in. Don't forget, Leslie Wexner is very much connected to Meshulam Rickless, who is the father of my abuser. Very, very much connected to all of this stuff. Now, my abuser is on a level kind of, I'm going to call it higher than Wexner, because remember, it's the people whose names you don't hear that are the people that are truly in power. People that you do hear, like Wexner, I'm going to call Wexner a high-level operative. I'm going to call Leon Black a high-level operative. But these were funnels used to put money into what we call the JE situation. Now, let's see. There are so many dots that you connect, Kirby. It's wild, the names that keep coming up again and again. Yeah, I mean, it gets foul, but it was foul from the very beginning. So let's see what else I can share with you about what Fitrakis shared back in 2019. And again, he was looking at this in the 1990s when JE was living in Ohio, in basically the second largest home, which was a 3-4 minute walk from the mansion that Wexner built for himself. Okay. So what Fitrakis answered to the question that I believe read before I went off on a tangent, the focus on JE and the underage girls causes the issue of Wexner's ties to organized crimes and crimes that occurred with the creation of New Albany, including bribery, to be ignored. It is horrendous what's happening with the trafficked girls, and horrendous that they sold the war in Iraq that killed roughly 1 million people and created 5 million refugees. And then there was a question about how far did he think that the JE situation reached, did it reach across the globe? And then Bob answers, the intelligence community and most major superpowers are running similar operations. So like Bob basically clarifies, insofar that they are related to the intelligence community, they know about each other. In JE's case, I don't necessarily think he would know who his counterparts are. In the late 1960s and 1970s, the FBI, for example, allowed middle-aged men to sell pot and run communal housing for young people in exchange for information or for blackmail purposes. And then, somebody posed this question: are you worried at all about the repercussions of pursuing this kind of investigation, that you might be blacklisted or even attacked? And to which he answers, he kind of did talk about the toe tag, that Candace Owens boldly starts her most recent podcast with, that you can only get through my book. Because, as I said, everything that Bob Fitrakis had on his Ask Me Anything, which he gave me permission, thank goodness, because he's such a nice man, to use, along with my first Ask Me Anything, which I condensed into a book form and I added additional information. That's the only place where the toe tag comment would come from. So it would be nice for, and yesterday I had an author who's, I'm not going to name, who initially, I gave a lot of information to a couple of years ago. And then I said to him, and he kept calling and calling and taking up a lot of my time, to which I then said, well, if you really want me to be your advisor, because when he reached out to me and now he has a book on Prince Andrew, that might give you a clue. I said, if you want to hire me as your consultant, let's talk about what you're going to pay me. I mean, people just think I'm an endless supply of information, but that you could just get it for free. Well, no, my time is valuable. I have to get up at 1 o'clock in the morning every day in order to put in minimum 12 hours, most days 16 hours every single day. And I do it again because I am here because I was looking for answers just for me, thinking it only applied to me. And then I stumbled upon the fact, oh my God, this is an expansive network. It wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about trying to kill me. It wasn't about just trying to silence me. It was about trying to silence a much bigger thing. So, law enforcement, Bob Fitrakis goes on to say, was investigating Wexner and J.E., and they refer to J.E. specifically as the boyfriend. It's clear that J.E. used his connection to Wexner, he adds, and Victoria's Secret as a way to recruit and transportation underage girls. With an alleged R word by J.E. happening at Wexner's mansion in New Albany. Now, this I want to clarify. Maria Farmer and Annie Farmer, neither of them had R word. And you can find it if you really look for the information. So mainstream media has inaccurately reported that they were R worded. They were assaulted in the sense that there was there were moves made to get them to do something. But in both Maria's case and in Annie's case, thank goodness, they were both able to they just left. Annie locked herself in the bathroom, and Maria was able to just jump off the bed while J.E. and Glenn were roughly manhandling her, and she locked herself in the room in Ohio on the property that belongs to Leslie Wexner. So even Bob kind of got that a little bit messed up, but not because he's careless, but because mainstream, when they began to report this, that's how they reported it. So let's see. What else can I share with you? A question came in, and it was like, would you characterize what J.E. was doing as a honey trap operation? And then Bob says, yes, that's a good generalization. He appears to have been operating a honey trap. Recall that the CIA set up a number of United Arab Emirates royal family with prepubescent girls in order to get him, a family member, he should have said member, to get him to act as the moneyed front man for the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, otherwise known, and this is me just interjecting here, as the Bank of Criminals and Crooks. And then he goes on to add, this was in the U.S. Senate's Kerry Brown report. The assumption in the intelligence community is that everyone has a vice and that knowledge is power. Clearly, Wexner and Epstein helped them bring Southern Air Transport to Ohio. The former Franklin County Sheriff and he's talking about the one in Columbus, Ohio, had significant evidence that Southern Air Transport was involved in, let's call it, substance trafficking. And so let me just keep scrolling. Uh, let's see. So he's asked, Bob, why do you think PDF rings crop up so often among rich and powerful groups? Does wealth make people want to SA children? Are PDFs attracted to power? Or is there some other explanation? To which Bob replies, this is not my area of expertise, but it reminds me of the notion of skull and bones, where the elite know each other's compromising sexual secrets and use them to build trust and solidarity. Also, there's an entourage, and they're always willing to provide these people with services, like services. And then, and this is how you get ahead. And frankly, that's true. And then let's see. Uh, he goes on to say that J.E. pled guilty to SAing underage girls. He does own a plane called the Lolita Express. And he tried to debunk the pizza thing, the Pizzagate, which was a complete distraction. And those of you who still follow Pizzagate, please, I'm hoping that you understand that that was a complete psyop. However, and Bob goes on to say in this, he didn't have a pizza place on the island, but he does own a ranch in New Mexico. And this is like well-established facts. This is not speculation. And then a very interesting question pops up. What is the one thing about JE that most people don't know and that we should know? To which Bob replies, and I'm going to make this the last question because you can read the rest of this in my book, Jeffrey Epstein Revealed, which is co-authored with Bob Fitrakis, because he gave me permission in July of 2019 to use it. And then just as I did, it was scrubbed, gone forever, but it's in my book. Okay, so J.E. was a person of interest in the 1991 death of Robert Maxwell, who either fell or was pushed off his yacht. Maxwell was a former member of British Parliament and was involved in publishing, but was also an Israeli spy. Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine, was thought to be the procurer of young women for J.E.'s trafficking. And so with that, I'm going to end reading most of Bob's, and actually he went on quite a while, some of Bob's responses to his AMA that he had in July of 2019 after the arrest. And so let's see. J.E. was the boyfriend. Darn, I played Polly in a musical called Boyfriend back when life almost felt so innocent. Okay, well, if you guys have questions, let me know. I think I've been answering the questions as I go along, and it's still really the wee hours of the morning. It's a little after 5 now. It's about 5:14 my time. And so, yeah, I mean, this is Bob Fitrakis. He's still very active. He's still very vocal. He was the first to report on the JE case. I don't think many people give him the credit that he's due. He was also the first person to say, oh, well, I think, he's going to be unalived. And sure enough, he's unalived. And by the way, I just want to add something to that. The people who keep bringing up not dead, but alive, living off on an island, drinking margaritas. I personally see that as a red herring, as just a distraction. Because again, even the JE case on its face, I see it as a big distraction. Because those of you who know my work know that I have just yesterday or the day before yesterday published Gerald Ford MK Ultra, which connects not just to Marilyn Monroe but to Johnny Gosch. He is the only sitting president that connects to Marilyn Monroe and Johnny Gosch. And there are a lot of strange connections, including Candy Jones, CIA. I mean, a lot of this is MK Ultra that is not discussed by mainstream at all, despite the fact that it's a well-known fact that MK Ultra was indeed the name of an over project which had a lot of sub projects that was exposed, and it's just go on and on. But there's just so much that is unconnected and that should be connected. And again, I'm motivated by the fact that I want to know all the nooks and crannies. I want to know why this happened and what's connected to this and who's connected to this and why certain things keep happening. And, for those of you who have followed me for a long time, you know that I don't do party politics. I will talk about the blue party. I will talk about the red party. I will talk about all politicians because my abuser knew all of the politicians, funded all of the politicians and his father funded politicians from their infancy. In this country, in other countries, it's like this is a big, big international mess. Okay, with that, I want to say thank you for joining me at such an ungodly early hour in the morning, at least for those of you who are on the East Coast. And I want to wish you all a good day. And I want to ask you to please please subscribe, please share so that I don't keep going, as being like silenced because I've been silenced for so long. Okay, guys, have a good day. Bye.